Happy Halloween, everyone. Unless it's not Halloween for you, and in that case, that is unlucky because Halloween is a good vibe. This video is going to be a bit different, and it is very long, so I'm just going to jump right into it. I will be going through every bauble in the game alphabetically, placing them in one of 8 tiers, tell you what they do, how to acquire them, and rank them from best to worst. You heard me correctly, I will be ranking every single bauble in the game from rank 1 to 63. These rankings will be my own opinion, of course, but they are founded upon a good amount of data, so I hope you enjoy. I will also be thinking about the baubles in terms of what they do for your playthrough above its usefulness as a crafting material. Let me know if you feel like I didn't give a particular bauble enough credit, and without further ado, let's get right into it. The first bauble on our list, starting with the A's, is the Advanced Flywheel Ring. This is a tricky bauble to start with as it cannot be acquired in survival mode, but it does have a solid use for creative mode. This bauble stores RF. As some of you redstone fans already know, RF refers to redstone flux, or in other words, energy that is created via redstone sources, circuits, and the like. This ring in particular stores a tremendous amount of energy and can be used as a strong power source that is small and convenient. I myself sadly am terrible with redstone, so I wouldn't be able to explain how to use this properly. For anyone who is a redstone expert though, you may already have some fun ideas. Because of the bauble not being allowed in survival mode though, it is ranked 57th place, only ahead of other baubles in the 69420Y category because you can actually use it in creative mode. Next is the Ankh charm. This bauble is certainly one of the first endgame baubles that the player is going to be introduced to. This bauble, however, is very expensive to make, requiring 5 different baubles and 4 gold, 2 of those baubles which can only be acquired via the end. This bauble, though, makes you immune to all status effects in the game, besides knockback, fling, instability, fear, cobwebs, and disarm, but let's not sweat the details. This bauble is a wonderful choice for an endgame player because it covers so many immunity grounds. The fact alone makes it an easy god tier bauble, and it is ranked 4th overall on my list. Next is the Ankh shield. This item gives you fire resistance, full knockback resistance, and all the effects of the Ankh charm. To make the bauble, you must combine another shield bauble, such as Cobalt shield or Obsidian shield, with the Ankh charm. This bauble, however, cannot be reforged into as many useful options as the Ankh shield. Knockback resistance is the only really helpful in PvP against low-geared opponents and against rare special enemies that you probably will just destroy by this time in the game. And fire resistance is not a problem because you're going to be having the Dragon's Eye. Because of this, the Ankh shield actually only makes it into the amazing category, but still grabs rank 9 overall. Moving on down the list slowly but surely with the balloon bauble. This bauble is made with spectral silt and wool and can also be found as loot in many structures and dungeons in the world. Also, when I say dungeons for the rest of the video, I mean Lycanite dungeons and Doom-like dungeons mainly, not really the crypt dungeons. I will state a specific dungeon type if I've seen the designated bauble more commonly in that dungeon though. Anyways, the balloon bauble decreases your fall damage and gives you a good jump boost. The bauble is solid and makes it into the always good category at rank 21. And now, a bauble that you will most likely all be acquainted with is up next, the Bezel. This is one of the first baubles you find in the game and gives you full immunity to poison. You get it from killing cave spiders. The bauble, however, is quickly outclassed by the poison stone and other baubles later, making it merely into the only at first category at rank 38. I would still recommend you go for this bauble early on though. It truly does come in handy until you find something better. The Black Dragon Scale comes next, and it is a difficult to acquire bauble that requires you to defeat the Ender Dragon to get an Ender Dragon Scale, and then you need to combine that Ender Dragon Scale with a Cracked Dragon Scale that you get in dungeons, and a Nether Star that you get from bosses like the Wither. The bauble offers withering immunity, which is nice, but for an endgame bauble, it could be better, so it only slides into the always good category at rank 20. The last bauble, starting with B, is the Broken Heart bauble, one of my personal favorites. This bauble saves you from dying when you take fatal damage at the cost of your base hearts being temporarily lowered by the effect. Temporarily lowered when the effect occurs. You merely have to sleep to get the hearts back, though. The bauble is indeed buggy on occasion, making me almost put it in the makes me cry category, to be honest. Because of it usually not working unless your hearts are really high when you take fatal damage, and the bauble does not save you from insta-kills like Gorgon Heads and Atomic Deconstructor in PvP. But the reason why it stays high up on the list is that it will save you from dying on its own on occasion. And that fact alone makes it easy god tier. You can find this bauble in mob towers, drops from certain enemies in dungeons, and even random structures. The drop rate isn't like particularly high, but with a lot of ways to find one, you are bound to get one sooner or later. With this bauble, you can be more reckless and play the way that you want. It is very powerful and slips into the god tier category at rank 6 overall. Moving on to C, we have the Cobalt Shield. A standard bauble that makes you immune to knockback. This shield can be found in dungeons and mob towers and can be made by surrounding a shield with spectral silt. This bauble is pretty standard though, so it only is rank 40 and the only good at first category. Next is the cross necklace. This powerful bauble is made with 4 spectral silt, 5 gold, but it can also be commonly found in dungeons. This bauble increases the time in between your character's own invulnerability after being attacked. This means that when enemies hit you, they won't be able to hit you again for 50% longer. If an enemy can normally hit you every 2 seconds, it can now only hit you every 3 seconds. It doesn't seem like much, but it helps a lot against certain enemies that attack a lot in rapid succession, like Amalgalage. This bauble is towards the top of the always good category at rank 14 overall. Next, the D's with the one and only Dragon's Eye. This bauble is just absolutely insane. This bauble makes you completely immune to all fire damage in the game, including lava, gives you night vision effect that you can toggle on or off, and it has a treasure effect that helps you look for any ore in the game that you can toggle on or off. It'll show you all treasure of that specific type within a 10 block radius. The bauble is expensive to make, requiring in total 3 glowing gems, 4 diamond swords, a dragon skull, a ring of enchanted eyes, but it is 100% worth it. The bauble, hands down, in my opinion, it takes the #1 spot for the best bauble in the game, allowing it to sit at the top of the god tier category. Now, on to the Dwarf Stout. Like the Fairy Dew, which some people are more acquainted with, it is a permanent effect of its prior item, in this case, the Ring of the Dwarves. This bauble is very rarely found in Doom-like dungeons, but it has the useful effect of making you mine much faster, and you get even more XP from mining. It is around 50% more XP for my personal testing, and that's pretty good. The ring also makes you a bit smaller, and this lowers your hitbox size. The Dwarf Stout, though, will make you a dwarf forever until you die or drink a restoration potion. To make a restoration potion, you will need to make a mundane potion or a thick potion with glowstone. Then brew a glowing powder into that to make an enhanced potion, and then lastly cook a nether star into that enhanced potion for the restoration potion. You would think that having an effect you want on permanently while freeing up a bauble spot would be nice, but perhaps you do not always want to be a dwarf for size complications or for whatever reason. And it also makes you use the Ring of the Dwarves as a material for the Dwarf Stout, so now you lose that bauble. And you normally cannot combine the Ring of the Fairies and the Ring of the Dwarves, though. But in testing, it works out fine to drink a Dwarf Stout and then equip a Fairy Ring. You will still have the passive mining speed effect that the Ring of the Dwarves / Dwarf Stout gave, and you will be the size of the fairy. So that's the best way to do it if you want to use the Fairy Ring. The sad thing, though, is that you do not get the extra XP from mining anymore while having the Fairy Ring equipped, it seems. So you would just have to remove the Fairy Ring if you want that mining XP for whatever reason. At endgame, by the time you have these rings, you might not need that extra mining XP. Anyways, with all this said and done, I actually rank the Dwarf Stout above the Ring of the Dwarves in the amazing category at rank 10, while the Ring of the Dwarves is at spot 11. I'll still talk more about the Ring of the Dwarves later, though. Pardon the nosebleed, I slammed my head against the wall because it's actually very hard to breathe in this thing. But I have no regrets. Next up, we're going to take a step back with the Emerald Amulet. This bauble takes up only 5 gold and 1 emerald to make, so it's a great early game bauble to reforge for the stats that you want. The necklace gives no base stats though, so it's rather useless after the first few hours in the game, but for those few hours it can come in handy, so it slips into rank 48 in the only at first category. Next, we have the emerald ring. This has the same use as the emerald necklace, but it only takes 3 gold instead of 5. So this places it also in the only at first category, but instead it's rank 47. Now onto the Ender Queen's crown. This crown is way too expensive to make, and it is incredibly not worth it to craft the item. This item can be found in dungeons and can also be dropped by rare and above enemies in the world. The crown makes Endermen fight by your side, which is really only semi-useful in the end, and all things considered, Endermen aren't the best servants. You are also extremely vulnerable to water while wearing this crown. All things considered though, it still has its uses while fighting in the end, so it takes the 35th spot in the can be good bracket. Our first can be good. Now on to the fairy dew. So we had previously talked about the dwarf stout, so this should be easier to cover. The fairy dew will make you a permanent fairy. You can also equip a ring of the fairies bauble to get this fairy effect, but with the fairy dew you will have the fairy effect permanently and your wings will be larger and more defined. The fairy effect lets you fly as if you were in creative mode, and it makes your hitbox incredibly small. This bauble is incredibly useful for PvE and PvP, so things can't hit you as easily. The fairy transformation, though, does decrease your base hearts a bit, so be wary. In this bauble's case, though, I would say that the Ring of the Fairies is better than the Fairy Dew. Like the earlier example with the Dwarf Stout, the Fairy Dew uses the Ring of the Fairies as a crafting material, and it also uses Dragon's Breath, which is super rare from Doom-like dungeons and crypt dungeons, or can be obtained from the Ender Dragon just by using empty bottles on his purple breath. The difference, though, to the Dwarf Stout is that if you drink the Fairy Dew first and then put on the Dwarves Ring, you do get the Dwarves effects, but you lose the Fairy Flight ability, which is what makes the Fairy Ring good in the first place. Because of this, it is better to use the Ring over the Dew. The Fairy Dew is still insanely good, though, allowing it to hit rank 7 overall at the top of the amazing category. The Ring of the Fairies, though, sits at rank 3 overall in the God tier category. I will revisit the Ring of the Fairies again briefly later when it gets down there in the alphabet. Now, the Flare Gun. This gun can only be used in creative due to the magic requirement, but it is useless regardless. I assume that maybe the gun is buggy or just plain useless, so it will be disabled. It hits spot 62, second to last in the 69420Y category, and it's only a bauble in name. You can't even equip it as a bauble. I don't know why the game tells you that it's a bauble. Now on to the standard Flywell ring. As you can probably guess, it's also in the 69420Y category. It also stores a good amount of RF or redstone flux energy, but since it's not as good as the advanced version, it ranks below it at rank 58 in this category. It does the same thing, just stores less energy as the advanced version. Next up, we have the Forbidden Fruits. This bauble will make you immune to the hunger status effect, so you can eat rotten flesh without worrying, for example, and it also makes you immune to nausea that a few enemies in the world sometimes inflict upon you. That makes your screen wobbly and things hard to see. You get the bubble as a rare drop from husks, or otherwise known as desert zombies. This bubble is solid and useful, but not overpowered in the slightest, so it sits at the bottom of the always good category at number 24. Now on to the Gluttony pendant, another really good bubble. This bubble makes you eat everything instantly. This can be very useful when eating food items with the effects like mucka meat, chupacabra meat, battle burritos, golden apples, for example. You make this pendant with a golden apple, a sinful pendant, and a cake. This pendant is utterly useless, though, if you don't take advantage of it in combat, but it is really strong if you use it consciously. You also drink everything instantly as well. So it sits at the top of the can be good category at rank 25. Next we have the Heavy Arrow Quiver. This bauble helps supply arrows if you run out of arrows in your inventory. and can be used as a storage system for 9 stacks of arrows. That's usually what I do. This bauble is very easy to make, only costing 2 diamonds, some string leather, and an arrow. This bauble can be obtained early game and saves you some inventory, so it's at spot 36 in the can be good category if you need some extra arrow storage. Next we have the heavy bolt quiver. It is only slightly harder to make over the heavy arrow quiver, requiring you to make a bolt since you're not going to find those in the world very easily, just because that fact that crossbows, and just because the fact that crossbows are inferior to bows, the bolt quiver actually goes down in rank. Also, all quiver baubles can only be equipped in the chest bauble slot, which hurts their ranking a little bit. You can still keep the quiver in your inventory just for storing arrows or bolts respectively, but bolts in particular are not very useful. The main reason crossbows are worse than bows is that crossbows, while they hit harder, they're not very strong when you're surrounded by enemies, and that's going to happen on occasion in RLCraft. You will much prefer having a quick firing bow in those scenarios with rapid fire, split shot, and multi-shot, for example. The heavy bolt quiver sits at the bottom of the waste of time section at rank 51 because you're always going to want to make a heavy arrow quiver instead. The bolt quiver baubles are all pretty much a waste unless you have no other options somehow. But you're always going to have the option to make the arrow equivalent instead of the bolt one. Now, this next bauble actually really let me down. It tells the player that it is a crafting material, but there's not a single thing that you can do with it. It is the iron ring. Now, either I'm missing something, or this item is indeed just a useless item incorrectly labeled as a bauble. It sits at the bottom of the makes me cry section at number 56. I looked forever to try to find a use for this thing. Really makes me cry. It should be even below the 69,420 ones, because at least you can use some of those in creative mode. You can't. There's literally nothing that you can do with this thing. Unlucky. Now, light arrow quiver. This can be made even earlier than the heavy arrow quiver, but keeps the same ranking as it is really only good early game. And ideally you would want to go for infinity as soon as you can anyways. It is going to be at rank 45. Now, light bolt quiver goes into rank 53 in the waste of time as well. Next up is the lucky horseshoe. This bauble is pretty rarely found in Lycanite dungeons, but it's completely rendered useless by the 69,420 effect. This bauble simply negates fall damage if the game allowed you to use it. It is ranked 61 in the 69,420 Y category. Next, the magic mirror. It falls into the exact same category, ranked 60 and rendered useless by the magic requirement. This item has been disabled, but normally it would be like the magic mirror in Terraria, allowing the player to teleport to their spawn point as if they had used a recall potion. Except they could use it over and over again, obviously. Unlucky. I do really like the magic mirror in Terraria. Now, onto our first semi-useful bauble in a while. We've gone through a whole bunch of bad ones through the alphabet now. And now we're back to the Miner's Ring. This ring can be found in dungeons as a drop from rare and above enemies, and can also be found in mob towers. The ring is going to give you a steady haste effect, which is nice. It allows you to mine faster. So it fits into the can be good category comfortably at number 33. Now moving on to the mixed color dragon scale, a much desired bauble. It's going to make you immune to not only wither but also poison. You have to combine a Bezel and a black dragon scale to make it, and that means it's very hard to make, obviously, because you don't get that black dragon scale until much later in the game. But this is also an ingredient for the Ankh charm, so that's why it's so hard to make. This bauble on its own is still amazing though, because there's going to be a lot of enemies in the game that are going to give you wither and poison. Knocking them both out in one bauble if you don't have the Ankh charm is really good. So that fact alone is actually going to put it in the amazing category up here at number 12, because that's just so important to be immune to wither and poison in RLCraft. Especially wither. Now, sadly, we have to go back to the quivers. The moderate arrow quiver and the moderate bolt quiver sit in between their respective light and heavy arrow quivers, alternative and ranked. They are ranked 44 and 50. Yeah, they're rank 44 and 52, respectively. Waste of time and can be good. Next up, another one of my personal favorite baubles, even though it's not an endgame one, and that is the Obsidian Shield. This bauble is made by combining an Obsidian Skull and a Cobalt Shield. The shield is better than the Obsidian Skull overall, since both baubles are temporary ones until you find something better. Because of this, reforging stats do not matter as much, because you can't really put, even though you can't put things like Undying on the item, it's not really that big deal since it's not going to be an endgame bauble for you. The Obsidian Shield's effects though are really good. It makes you immune to knockback, and it makes you 50% resistant to all fire damage, which is huge. This bauble is great before you get a Dragon's Eye, so it's going to actually sit at rank 23 in the always good category. Next is the Obsidian Skull. This bauble will also give you 50% fire resistance and immunity to burning damage. You make the skull with a skeleton skull, 4 obsidian, 2 blaze powder, and 2 potions of fire resistance, so you can get this relatively early on after a couple mob towers. This bauble is a truly wonderful bauble to go for before the Dragon's Eye. If you have a Cobalt Shield, you might as well go for the Obsidian Shield though, like I said earlier, because the more immunities early game, the better. The bauble, though, is still great, squeezing into the always good category at rank 30, behind the shield. Next, this bauble sits last place on the entire list, and that is the Phantom Prism. Now, why did I put it in last place? I will explain. Like the Fair Layer Gun, it's only a bauble in name, and can't actually be equipped. So, even if the magic requirement wasn't 69,420, the prism wouldn't be able to be equipped, and all it would allow you to do is to toggle on and off your armor's visibility while still having the armor stats, which I guess is kind of cool. It's a fully cosmetic item with no use at all that the game still decided to disable despite serving no gameplay advantage. It makes it to the bottom of our list. I guess Shivixi didn't want your cute little duck skin to show as you're killing dragons or something. You have to wear your armor with pride. Unlucky. Next, we have the interesting Phytoprostatia amulet, one of the most least known baubles in the game. This bauble is very easy to make if you find yourself stranded in a defiled lands biome early game. It protects you against Vilespine and Blastem, which are hazardous plants that you can find only in the defiled lands biome. Needless to say, this bauble is not very useful since it's basically just an emerald necklace anywhere besides the defiled lands biome. This bauble sits in the only at first category because of it being relatively easy to make and still has its uses though. It is ranked 43rd overall. Now we have the Poison Stone, one of the most insanely powerful items if used properly. This Poison Stone just about triples your damage that relies on poison and makes you immune to poison that enemies inflict upon you, similarly to the Bezel. This bauble allows for the Envenomed and Viper combo on your sword to truly show its strength, allowing your damage to crit into the thousands on certain enemies. Without the enchantment Viper though, the bauble is basically just a craftable Bezel that is made with 4 glowing ingots, 4 fermented spider eyes, and 1 emerald, but that's still great. Because of this bauble's potential and it being an endgame bauble that I personally use, it has a bit of a boosted ranking. This bauble sits at the top of the always good category at rank 13. Now, the Polarized Stone. This bauble is useful as well. It's mainly used as a simple means of collecting loot in the dungeons and the like right now, but its other use Repel can actually still be used as a last resort. This bauble attracts loot to you with its first effect and blocks all projectiles with its second effect. Both of these effects can be turned on or off with keybinds that you can adjust in your control section in Options, just like the Dragon's Eye. Your hunger gets drained faster than a speeding bullet when the Repel effect is being used though, so I recommend you only using it if absolutely necessary, or if you luckily found a forbidden fruit food item, which is one of the rarest items in the game. So I recommend you only using it as a last minute resort. But yeah, the forbidden fruit can be eaten an infinite amount of times and gives you more saturation than any other food item in the game. That's an amazing item. But yeah, the Polarized Stone was once a community favorite bauble but because of its limitations in the current patch 2.8.2, it only hits rank 18 in the always good category. Next, we move on to the potion ring baubles, starting with the standard potion ring. This bauble is even a bit easier to make early game compared to the emerald ring because of it requiring lapis over an emerald, so it sits a little bit above the emerald ring at rank 46 in the only at first category. Now, the potion ring of haste. This ring lets you mine noticeably faster and is pretty easy to make, only requiring emeralds and a potion ring. The bauble is not as useful as combat stuff in RLCraft for the most part, but it still has its moments. The potion ring of haste gives you a stronger haste effect than the minor ring, putting it just above its rank at 32 in the can be good category. And before I continue, I will let you guys know that all potion ring effects actually stack if you double up on the item. For example, if you put on 2 potion rings of haste, you will get double the haste effect. And this works on all the other potion rings, double regeneration, double resistance, etc., etc. Now, the potion ring of jump boost. This bauble requires rabbit's foot, that is a relatively rare drop from rabbits, and a slime block. This ring, though, as I found out, does not stack with the other jump boost items in the game, making it pretty much useless. It even overrides the jump boost of other items, like the balloon bauble and the high jump on your boots, being actually an item that makes you weaker. The jump boost the ring gives is also very small, being only 2 blocks. Because of this laughable result from my testing, the ring finds itself in actually the makes me cry section, a rank 54 overall. Like I said, if you have a balloon bauble and high jump on your boots and you're jumping really high, if you put on this jump boost, it's going to negate all that and you're only going to jump over 2 blocks. Like, it's broken. It's actually such a waste. Now onto the potion ring of regeneration, a wonderful bauble. This is going to require gas tiers to craft, so it isn't necessarily too much of an early game item unless you loot some gas tiers from observers in mountain biomes or from chests in a mega battle tower. But the ring is a very solid item to possess. This ring will heal you passively over time at a decent rate, making it a great addition to your gear arsenal when you can finally make one or get lucky enough to find one. It is a rare drop from Dungeons and Mob Towers as well. It sits comfortably in the always good category at rank 16. And now, the ring's rival, the potion ring of resistance. This ring will make you take 20% less damage from all sources and can be made very early, only requiring diamonds and a potion ring to make. Because of how fast you can make this bauble and the solid resistance it gives, the bauble sits comfortably right next to the regen ring at rank 17 overall in the always good category. And remember, like I said earlier, if you equip 2 of these rings, you're going to get 40% resistance to all damage. And making that very early game is a really good thing that you can do. Next down on the potion ring list is the potion ring of speed. This ring is also very easy to make, only requiring sugar and redstone. This ring will make you a bit faster, which is always nice, and can be made very early. However, the speed boost is very small, you will quickly find something better, so it only sits in the can be good category at number 31. Last, but certainly not least for the potion rings, is the potion ring of strength. This bauble gives you a small damage boost of around 33% of your standard weapon damage. And it can be made rather early on with just a potion ring, a magma block, that can be made from 4 magma cream as well, and 4 blaze powder. 33% extra damage early on is actually really solid. But remember that damage is not always your priority. Sometimes defense is going to be more important to you. But despite that, the ring sits at the top of the can be good category at rank 27. Now we have the Pride Pendant. This pendant will give you the Sinful buff, which is 20% more damage and 20% more armor when you have full health. This is not too bad for late game where you're going to be full health more often, but there are better amulets that you can wear. Plus it takes a Sinful amulet, which is a rare drop from dungeons or requires a lot of spectral silk to make, and a golden crown, which requires a scarlight to make. So the pendant only sits at rank 29 in the can be good category. Next up, the Ring of Enchanted Eyes. This notorious ring is very well known for making players search far and wide for a carrot, and also for giving players night vision. It is not extremely expensive to make, only requiring 1 golden ingot, 4 iron, and 1 golden carrot, but it is not extremely useful and gets replaced simply by the Dragon's Eyes night vision that can be toggled on or off. The ring on its own sits at rank 41 in the only at first category. Next, onto a personal favorite of mine, the Ring of Free Action. This ring makes you immune to the slowness status effect, makes you immune to the levitation status effect, and it also lets you move through cobwebs freely, which cannot be done with any other item in the game. You need to combine a Ring of Overclocking and a Shulker Heart at an anvil to make one of these. Since it is very common for rare enemies to slow you down in cobwebs, it truly is an amazing bubble. For an invincible barbarian build, at least it's a must, because getting slowed down by cobwebs is not very Spartan-like at all. Not very Spartan-like indeed. This ring sits on rank 8 in the amazing category for me. Speaking of the Ring of Overclocking though, it's next up on our list. This ring is dropped by strays, or sprays, I think they're called. Or in other words, the cold skeletons that shoot those slowing arrows at you, and it gives you 7% movement speed and immunity to slowness. Movement speed on its own is really great, and the ring is not actually all that rare considering all the places you can find sprays in RLCraft. So it hits at rank 22 in the always good category. Now, we take a step back and look at the Ring of the Dwarves and the Ring of the Fairies. So I already talked about these items, permanent versions in depth earlier, you know, the Dwarf, Stout, and the Fairy Dew, but now it's time to talk about the individual items. The Ring of the Dwarves and the Ring of the Fairies can be found in the Doom-like dungeons, or the standard dungeons in the game, at a very rare rate, and the Ring of the Dwarves will give you much faster mining speed, gives you more XP from mining, and decreases your hitbox by about half. This ring is very great and earns its spot at rank 11 in the amazing category. The Fairy Ring, on the other hand, is even more amazing though, because it actually grants you the ability to fly. This alone makes you pretty free to explore and remain unkillable from most things, and when paired with its second ability, which makes you incredibly small and hard to hit, you will truly be a little hard to hit fiend. Remember, you're going to lose some base hearts when using the ring, but other than that, the ring is amazing and a fun bauble, allowing it to steal number 3 overall in the God tier category as the 3rd best bauble in the game. Now, enough of the recap baubles. Let's move on to the Scarlight Ring. This ring only takes 4 Umbrian ingots, a black heart that you get from killing Enderman type enemies in the Defiled Lands, and a Scarlight to make. The ring gives you a health regeneration buff similar to the regen ring. This ring's regeneration buff actually comes from changing your character's base values though, so it messes with your jump height similarly to the potion ring of jump boost. You can only jump at max 2 blocks while wearing this ring, which is sad. This makes the ring kind of bad since it messes with that value, and the ring also heals you about 2 to 3 times slower than the ring of regeneration. The rings do stack though, so if you put 1 Scarlight ring and a regen ring together, you're going to get a little extra healing. You might as well just stack 2 regen rings at that rate though. It'll be a lot more efficient. Because of all these drawbacks, the Scarlight Ring, despite being an easy to make in the Defiled Lands bubble, it's only going to be ranked at number 39 in the only at first category. Next, we're going to move on to the Shield of Honor. This bauble is solid, taking up only 1 bauble slot and gives you around 33% damage resistance from all sources. But it is very expensive to make. 2 Rings of Resistance will give you 40% damage resistance as well, and that will overwrite the Shield of Honor's effect. So if you use the Shield of Honor, don't use regen rings. But you usually don't use regen rings for endgame anyways, so this 33% damage can kind of just replace those rings. It'll save you a bauble slot. The bauble is not god tier because of it requiring a dragon egg to make though for only 33% damage mitigation, but it does slide into slot 15 in the amazing category. Next up is the original Sinful pendant itself. This pendant, despite being a very cool reference, is expensive to make and gives you no buff at all. Of course, it is a crafting material for the other pendants, but as an item alone, it's subpar, expensive to make and does nothing. So it hits slot 50 in the waste of time category. And on to the Shulker Heart. This bauble makes you immune to levitation, and it can be found by killing shulker boxes in the end. This bauble is not extraordinary alone though, and it is pretty dangerous to go into the end and grab one of these if you're under geared. So the bauble is actually only going to sit at rank 34 in the can be good category. Because by that point in the game, you're probably not going to equip this item, you're just going to want it for the Ankh charm. Now on to an interesting bauble. The Stone of Greater Inertia. This bauble is one of the most desired baubles in the game. It gives you an incredible jump boost and an incredible speed boost that stacks with everything else in the game, except for, the Scarlet Ring and the Potion Ring of jump boosts are going to override it, so don't put those on. But I've only ever found this bauble as a drop 2 times. This bauble drops from infernal enemies that only have a 0.1 chance of spawning from a random enemies. In other words, if you fight 1,000 zombies, odds are only one of them will be an infernal zombie. These infernal zombies not only can be very strong, but they actually drop a total of 56 different items, and they're only going to drop 1 item at a time. And obviously the Stone of Greater Inertia is only one of those 56 items. The fact that I found 2 is actually nothing short of a miracle, really, even though I have played for thousands of hours. This ring, similar to the Stone of Negative Gravity and Stone of Inertia Null, is basically an urban legend because of how hard it is to be found. Only the truest of the die-hard adventurers have ever found one of these. Or, I guess the really lucky ones, of course, like me. I feel like I have not ever searched for this bauble. I've just gotten lucky and found it. The bauble's ability, giving the wearer insane speed and jump boost, though, makes the item the second strongest bauble in all of RLCraft, in my opinion. Speed and jumping, you can get away from pretty much anything if you want to. This is an easy god tier bauble for me, in between the Dragon's Eye and the Ring of the Fairies. Now, let's move on to less exciting and, well, actually saddening Stone of Inertia Null. So, like the stone implies, this bauble, while having the same rarity as the Stone of Greater Inertia that we just talked about, actually has the effect null, which means 0, having no value. This ring is the ultimate middle finger to adventurers, because the ring only drops from infernal enemies, and it does absolutely nothing. It's basically an emerald ring that requires glowing ingots to reforge. I myself have luckily never found one of these. It is the only bauble in the game that I have never found. Imagine finding an infernal enemy on your search for the Stone of Greater Inertia, and instead it drops a Stone of Inertia Null. I know I would certainly rage for sure. This bauble is an easy makes me cry. Easy makes me cry. Landing at 55 overall. Only beaten out by the Iron Ring in uselessness as a bauble, because at least you can equip this item. But really, that's so sad that such a rare item actually has the effect null, implying 0, nilch, nada. I did a lot of testing, it doesn't do anything. It's very unfortunate. I would have thought maybe it would make you slower, but it doesn't. It literally does nothing. Now, on to the Stone of Negative Gravity. Another fun one, actually. I've only found this bauble once, and it was in my 2.6 world. This bauble is just as rare as the Stone of Greater Inertia and the Stone of Inertia Null, only being dropped by infernal enemies that, again, only have that 0.1% spawn rate. That's 10 times rarer than 1%, if you didn't know. But this bauble is very unique. It is unnecessary, obviously, but it's very unique. This bauble, when worn, will allow the user to jump, right? So when you jump, but then you don't fall. You just jump and you stay, right, in the air. It makes you afloat. It strips your ability to move faster in walking speed until you descend back to the ground. So when you jump up, you can't sprint anymore, but you're going to be floating 1 block up high. While you are in the air, Or if you jump into other words, you will only be able to rise or fall by clicking. And this keybind cannot be changed. You cannot change this. Clicking is always going to be the way to move with this thing. So either you're going to change your primary attack or just be ready to use your main hand every single time you do something while in the air with this bauble equipped. While in the air, you're going to press left click to rise and hold crouch and left click to fall. Luckily, you can rebind your crouch to whatever you want. But you only go up one block at a time or go down one block at a time. So if you click, you go up one block, one block, one block, one block, one block. It's like a super terrible fairy ring, and you're really slow while doing it. But it's still neat. You can technically rise up the size of mob towers and structures if you want while using this item. And it is really rare. So I say it's pretty fun, but it's very weak. It's a lot weaker than the fairy ring, and they do pretty much the same things, really. So it's a worse version of the fairy ring, and it's just as rare as the rarest baubles in the game. Because of it not being very strong and it takes you weeks to obtain, it's going to make its way actually into the waste of time category, just because you're going to waste weeks for this bauble that is not very strong. Just go through a few dungeons and find a fairy ring, trust me. It's rank 49 overall, but it is really cool. I actually really had fun with this bauble, just because of how ridiculously dumb it was. Now on to the wonderful bauble, another one of my personal favorites, the Stone of the Sea. This necklace is arguably the best amulet in the entire game, and it can be made very easily with only 4 glowing ingots, 4 raw fish, and a single prism ring crystal that you get from most aquatic creatures, the easiest ones being strider and sirens, since those are fairly common. This bauble is going to give the player water breathing, a Depth Strider 3 effect that also stacks with Depth Strider, fundamentally giving you Depth Strider 9 when you stack both of these effects. And the bauble also does not let your character sink, so you're pretty much immune to the weight status effect in the water. As long as you do not descend on purpose, you won't drown. But you also have water breathing anyways, so it doesn't matter if you go underwater. Another neat point with this bauble is that the Stone of the Sea makes you swim so fast that you can actually swim pretty fast in lava. This bauble is an easy god tier bauble for me, and it actually sits at rank 5 overall on my list. Next, as we approach the end of our list, we come to the coolest bauble in the game, the Shades, or the Sunglasses. You make this bauble with 2 glass, a stick, and 4 spectral silt, and it can be found in random loot chests, structures, or dungeons all over the world. This bauble gives you immunity to blindness, which can really come in handy against reapers and grues for early game. This bauble is not incredibly OP, and it is a little expensive to make for early game, but really for early game it's very nice and comes in handy, especially against grues and reapers. It cements its spot at the top of the only at first category, at rank 37. Next is the tool belt, a very standard belt that needs no introduction. It's one of the easiest baubles in the game to make, requiring only 1 leather, 1 iron, 1 string, and it can also be found in mob towers and other places, such as dungeons and structures. It's fairly common to find, but even easier to make. It's going to slide into the only at first category at rank 42. Now, fourth to last on our list, we have the notorious Vitamins Bauble. This bauble makes you immune to mining fatigue, which is huge. This will allow you free range in underwater dungeons, and it will also let you dual wield 2-handed weapons or use a 2-handed weapon with a shield, because normally if you try to use like 2-handed weapons, like 2 great swords, it's going to give you a mining fatigue effect. With the vitamins, now you're immune to that. This bauble can be found by it's almost a guaranteed drop from killing Elder Guardians. I cannot remember the last time I've killed an Elder Guardian and not getting a Vitamins bauble from it. Obviously, it gets replaced 100% by the Ankh charm, but before you get to that point, the Vitamins bauble sits towards the top of the can be good category at rank 26. And another fun fact is it's a very great source of spectral silt to go through those underwater dungeons and kill those guardians at the spawners. Don't break the spawners, just get spectral silt over and over again. That's how I get my stacks of spectral silt to reforge my spectral silt baubles into undying quality or punishing or whatever I want on them. Third to last, we have the wormhole mirror. This bauble, seemingly straight out of Terraria, would allow the player to teleport to their spawn point or to other players, and it would be usable over and over again. This bauble, sadly, just like it seems some other Terraria-themed baubles, was rendered useless in RLCraft with the magic requirement 69-420. This makes the item fit into slot 69 in its designated category. Second to last, we have the Wither Ring. This bauble is actually rather decent, since Wither is one of the most difficult things for an undergeared player in RLCraft to deal with. This bauble makes you immune to Wither, and it can be made with 4 iron ingots, 4 glowing ingots, and a dragon skull or Wither skeleton skull in the middle. This ring makes it into the always good category at rank 19 because of how useful it is to have a ring with Wither immunity on it. Last, but certainly not least, we have the Wrath Pendant. This pendant is pretty slept on, but it still actually has its usefulness. This pendant is made with 3 bones, a skeleton skull, and a symbol pendant, making it rather easy to make. It's probably the easiest of the sin pendants to make. It gives you a 20% damage boost and a 20% armor boost for 10 seconds whenever you crit an enemy. And when attacking a lot of enemies, you're going to crit enemies like every few hits. So you're going to pretty much have this effect on for most of your fights. So just think of it as like 20% extra damage, but obviously a potion ring of strength is going to give you 33% extra damage. But still, this is a decent pendant. It's going to sit at rank 28 overall in the can be good category, but it's still not as good as the potion ring of strength, and it doesn't really stack with it. So if you want damage, just go for the potion ring of strength. Oh wow, actually, holy crap, that is a lot of bubbles. I actually got through the entire list. That took a lot longer than you might have thought. Some of these baubles technically shouldn't count as baubles, but they're only baubles in the game files, but I had to include them because I don't want to sound clickbaity, so I put in all the baubles in the game that were registered as bubbles. I try not to sweat the details of some of them technically being items, like the flare gun and the prism, but so that is all 63 baubles in RLCraft organized into a relatively accurate tier list. It took a lot longer to make this list than I had expected, but I have to say that it wasn't all bad. I actually enjoyed making the list. I've always enjoyed ranking things, so this was right up my alley, just time consuming. I hope you guys enjoyed the video and got some useful information out of it. Happy Halloween again. If it's not Halloween, it is what it is. I hope you have a great holiday. I'm sure that you may disagree with a few ranks on this list, but that is okay. It is my own opinion from my own experience after all. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I wish you the best of luck out there. Take care of yourself, and I'll see you around. Bye-bye.
Fire spreading all around my room. My world's so bright, it's hard to breathe, but that's alright. Hush.